Welcome to Alasquatch, the show all about Bigfoot and the great state of Alaska. I'm your host, Beans Baxter. So lace up your boots, zip up your coat, and come with me on an adventure as we explore all things cryptid in the last frontier. Hey, welcome to this week's edition of Alasquatch. We are back. We are here with our highly anticipated review of Ghostbusters Afterlife. If you have not seen the movie, which it's been out for a couple weeks now, so it's gonna, you've had a chance to see it. So if you don't want to be spoiled, don't listen to this until after you've seen it. So this is your warning, because we're gonna spoil the heck out of it. So this is your spoiler warning right now. Other than that, in the studio with me again this week is Mrs. Legume, aka the old lady, aka my bride.
Hi, everybody.
And we went to see the movie CryptidCon weekend, Sunday, after we packed everything up, and we went out to a nice dinner, which is our conference tradition. And then we went and watched Ghostbusters in IMAX there in Lexington. And I've actually seen it twice now. I went up to Anchorage this weekend. I had to pick up some stuff. We've got some family that are moving out of state. They wanted to give us some stuff to hold on to for them, and also give us some stuff that they couldn't get rid of before they moved. So I went up there to Anchorage to pick that up, and it just so happens that during that time frame I was up there, my brother-in-law had a private screening of Ghostbusters. He had rented a theater out for him and his friends, and he had a couple extra seats, so I got to tag along and go. So I have seen it twice now. You've only seen it once.
Yeah, that's okay.
Only seen it once. But I think we've probably talked enough about it that it's still pretty fresh in our minds. And I mean, I think in my case, it's safe to say that if it wasn't for the original Ghostbusters, there's a good chance I might not be sitting here talking. I might not have this podcast because it was one of the things that kind of got me interested in paranormal, unexplained, strange phenomena, stuff like that, which led to Bigfoot, of course. So Ghostbusters is one of my big inspirations, and it meant a lot to me growing up as a kid. I had a bunch of the toys. I always watched the cartoons, stuff like that. So I was always a really huge fan of it. And I have an unpopular opinion of the 2016 Ghostbusters with the female cast, that it was not as terrible as everybody says it is. And I'll mention why here a little bit later in the review of Ghostbusters Afterlife, why I feel that way. But we're gonna talk about this movie today. So
okay. So I think first we should mention, of course, the original was 1984. Of course, all the cast members, for the most part, were members of Saturday Night Live. They're comedians. So the best thing about the original Ghostbusters is the use of practical effects was amazing. All the ghosts look different. That's one thing I loved about the original, and that is one of my pet peeves about the 2016, is all the ghosts look exactly the same. That bothered me. But the characters all had different senses of humor. They all had a sense of humor, but they were all different, and I thought they just worked off each other really, really well. We just watched the original Ghostbusters just the other day. You can put it on at any time, and you never get tired of it. And sometimes, every once in a while, I'll notice little things I didn't notice before. It happens every once in a while with movies. You've seen them 100 times, but you really pay attention to them at a particular moment, and you notice something, or maybe it hits you differently because you're older now. Like as a kid, you didn't really notice the adult humor in it. But so the original Ghostbusters, of course, is always going to be king. Like with most movies, the original is always the best. But this one is a continuation. It's not a reboot. It's not a remake. It's a continuation. So it opens up, though, with this farmhouse out in the middle of nowhere. What was the state they were in?
Oklahoma.
Oklahoma. Of course it was Oklahoma. And it opens up with this farmhouse at night. You see what looks like a trap go off on this mountainside. This big mountain, there's the beam of the trap. And then a car goes racing through the cornfield. And, of course, based on the trailers and everything you've heard, this is Egon that's there in the car. But did you know what entity was coming after him? Because I thought it was one of the dogs.
No, I didn't know, and I don't think they didn't give us enough information, I don't think, to know.
Not at that point, but later on, I guess when we get there, when you rethink about it, I thought that was one of the dogs coming after him because he had captured one of the other dogs, but I guess we'll talk about that later. But that's the opening scene, is basically Egon is in Oklahoma at this farmhouse, and he's trapped a ghost, and it's about him basically battling this other ghost to try to keep it from freeing its friend, I guess. I don't know. What's your impression of the opening scene? It was creepy.
Yeah, it had a really creepy atmosphere about it. It was good, and it wasn't super scary. I mean, the original Ghostbusters had kind of an element of horror to it, but I think this was probably the scariest part of the movie, probably.
I would agree.
And it was a lot of unknown. Like, you don't really see what's coming, or you can't. A lot of unknown suspense.
Yeah.
And then basically the scene ends with Egon. Well, we don't know it's Egon at the time, but
we know it's Egon.
Everybody,
even though they don't tell us, we know.
I mean, if you watch the trailers, I think you would know it was Egon. Slumped over in his chair, basically deceased. And then it cuts to a family. We meet.
Well, you missed an important part.
What?
What's the device they have in their hand? I don't know.
A PKE meter.
Okay. After Egon slumps over in the chair, what goes off underneath the chair? The PKE?
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I love the movie, but I don't know all the terms for all the gadgets. The PKE meter starts to go off. So my first thought is, okay, he's a ghost. Yeah. That's what you thought too,
yeah,
right?
Yeah.
So that was a little key component. The PKE meter goes off.
So then it cuts to we meet the new family. The what's his name? Finn Wolfhard.
Yeah.
The Phoebe. I can't remember her name.
McKenna Grace. I've never seen her in anything else before.
And then their mom, Carrie Coon. And basically they're getting kicked out of their apartment. We get a really quick introduction to them. Phoebe's good with science. She's like rewiring the apartment. What's Finn's name? Trevor is watching videos about cars, while his mom...
They're definitely establishing the skills of these kids.
Yeah. So and then
mom's a basket case.
And then mom can't pay her rent and gets evicted. And then they move to Oklahoma, to Somerville is the name of the town. Mm-hmm. And they're under the impression, the kids are under the impression they're just going to go, settle up the estate and then get back to their lives. And mom kind of drops the revelation on them, like, we can't go back, we got evicted, we're going to have to stay here until we can get back on our feet. And I feel so we're basically, Egon's given this instant family that we had no indication existed. They're at the house. Janine comes in, Janine from the first movie, the Ghostbusters secretary, introduces herself, because when she first walked in, and I thought there for a minute there was going to be a moment where the mother, Carrie, mm-hmm. looks at her and goes, Mom, what the hell's going on? And that wasn't what we got. And Janine basically, they basically were like, who the hell are you? And she's like, I was a friend, I helped your father pay his bills and blah blah blah. And so that was kind of any basically shipping of Janine and Egon gets thrown out right there. And so I'm like, okay, well, if Janine's not her mom, then who the hell is her mom? And we never learned that. Spoilers. And there's no pictures or anything like that gives us any idea. And also something that I've kind of pieced together because I've seen the movie twice, and I've also watched a couple of videos on it and, read up on some things. And from what I understand, for these characters to be the age they are right now, if the movie takes place right now, the mother, of the two kids in the movie, she would have had to have been born during Ghostbusters 2. So apparently during Ghostbusters 2, Egon had a family, and were never introduced to him. They never mentioned him. So I thought, and apparently Ghostbusters 2, because a lot of people were saying, well, Ghostbusters 2 must not have happened because they don't mention it in the movie. They do mention New York. They mention Gozer. You know, they show footage from the end of the first movie where they climb up on Dana Barrett's building and, you know, fight Gozer. But they never mention anything about, what was his name? Vigo?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's Vigo.
Yeah, they never mention Vigo. They never mention the museum.
Sigourney Weaver's baby.
Oscar
yeah.
None of that stuff is mentioned. Although there are, from what I don't, and I looked, and the second time I saw it, I didn't see any. Apparently, there are Easter eggs from the second Ghost. The toaster, the dancing toaster, is somewhere in the farmhouse. I never saw it. I didn't know to look for it the first time. I did the second time. I looked for it, still couldn't find it. So, but if Ghostbusters 2's canon, then that means that Janine and Louis Tully were probably together, or at least for a while. So that might explain why she's not with Egon, but it still doesn't explain who this girl's mother is, and how long were her and Egon together. Why, you know, none of that is explained. Which, I mean, to be fair, we never really get into Ray or Winston's love life either. The only one that has any kind of love life is Peter. So, I mean,
yeah, but they're producing a family. They're producing a family that we're supposed to care about.
Yeah.
And it's the family of Egon, someone who could barely speak to a woman, get alone sleep with one. Only thing I could think of is that he did an experiment, and that's what his daughter is some kind of experiment, or he donated sperm. But it's a little weird to give Egon a family yet not really tell us where did they come from, because there must have been a woman involved. Who's the woman? So yeah, they kind of, I call that lazy writing. But, you know, in the grand scheme of things, oh well, who cares?
Well, I mean, because the original OG Ghostbusters are still alive, they can throw them on the screen and you know, whatever, talk about them, explain about them. Harold Ramis is dead. I think he died, was it 2014, something like that. So basically the only way to get him back into the movie is probably to introduce a family, a connection that he has. So, I mean, this is what they decided to do. I didn't per se have a problem with any of the characters. I actually thought the kids, Trevor was a little annoying, but not super annoying. There's a line in one of the trailers where when the house is shaking and he goes, remember that summer we died under a table or something like that? And I was like, oh my God, he's going to be so annoying. But I think that was probably the most annoying thing he said. And Phoebe, I thought, was really well done. I enjoyed her character. I enjoyed there was only one scene that I'm sure you'll mention, because I think you had a problem with it that we'll get into, but I didn't find the kids to be super annoying, which is the case in a lot of movies with kid protagonists.
I would agree. Yeah, a lot of times when you had kids in older movies in the 80s and 90s, the kids would usually actually be high schoolers, like older, so you wouldn't find them as annoying. Traditionally, we don't like small children. We don't like kids, you know, that are preteen age. We find them to be quite annoying, and oftentimes in movies they'll put them in positions that kids of that age are just not going to be in. So as those of us who were once kids or who have kids, we know what they're capable of, and oftentimes they're not capable of much of anything as far as stressful situations, how to handle stressful situations. But at no point was I saying to myself, oh, that's unbelievable. And they really showed, Phoebe was quite intelligent. She was a scientist. She called herself a scientist. So they're basically saying that Egon's intelligence was hereditary. So she inherited his intelligence. Not sure what the mom inherited, but his crippling anxiety.
Apparently it skips a generation.
I guess so. Because she was, wow, what a basket case. I mean, she was the child, the kids were the parents.
I did get kind of that. Well, she was an alcoholic.
Oh, definitely.
There's a line very early in the movie where they're driving into the town, and Trevor's looking at his cell phone, and he goes, I don't even have one bar, or there's not even one bar. And she goes, there better be a bar. And then there's another scene later on where she's basically passed out at the kitchen table with a wine glass in front of her. And then I think there's another scene where she's out having dinner with Paul Rudd's character, and they're drinking. Which,
yeah, she almost always had alcohol.
Yeah, so I mean, it's definitely, it's kind of like Tony Stark and his drinking in the original Iron Man. Like they're alluding to it, but they don't cram it down your throat. It's definitely, if you look for it, it's there.
Yeah. So basically, they show up in the town. So now the kids have to go to school, because this is also kind of confusing because they mention it's summer break, but yet the kids go to school, kind of?
Well, Phoebe.
Summer school?
Phoebe does. Trevor goes to work.
Oh, that's right. Why did Phoebe go to school?
Well, I think I was wondering that myself, but the second time I watched it, I was like, well, why is she going to school? And they basically have a conversation as they're walking, and her and her mother have a conversation as they're walking toward the school, where Phoebe says, I enjoy learning, I like learning, but, I don't want to go, I hate public school or something like that. And the mom says, well, you can either, come here, or you can come home and help me clean asbestos out of the attic. And Phoebe's like, no, I'll go here. So it sounds like it's probably Phoebe's choice to go to school because she
needs to get out of the mom's way or help her. So this is the only place to put her, basically, if she's not going to help her around the house. And that's another thing that's kind of surprising to me is the mom has no money. Like, she didn't even have money to pay rent one more time. But they're driving what I assume is cross country. She's paying for supplies to fix up this house. Where's this money coming from? I found that to be a little frustrating. I'm like, you can't even afford rent one more month, yet you're putting all this money. We know how expensive gas is. This is unrealistic. Yeah. Forget the ghosts. The fact that gas prices.
My thought with that was, I don't know where the money was coming from, but my thought was she's going to try and make the house as presentable as possible and sell it. That was kind of my thing. And then what was it? There was another question you posed there about.
Oh, how she could afford to move the kids down there and fix up the house? Like, where's the money coming from?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm sure they probably have a few, dollars. Just because she might. Who knows how much rent was? And it never really explained where they came from.
That's true. How expensive was the place they were coming from? Because if it was New York, we've heard about rent in New York.
Well, there was a scene. There's a scene where you can see the license plate on their car. And it's not a New York plate, but I couldn't tell where it was from. So I don't think they were living in New York, but I don't know where it was.
Yeah. So far I think we're kind of following a pretty classic, storyline. Family inherits something. They're going to go to the locations, not what they expect. And they're going to be stuck in the town, and now they got to become a part of the community. And so we see Trevor go to get dinner that night at the local sock hop, which is kind of cool because they're on roller skates.
It's called Spinners.
Spinners
is the name of the restaurant.
That was pretty cool. And so this is where he's going to apply for a job because there's a girl there that named Lucky who he finds attractive, and so he wants to spend more time with her.
So on the subject of Lucky, I didn't find her annoying, but her whole purpose in this entire movie was to smirk at Trevor as he was a fish out of water and make snide comments to him about being a fish out of water. I kind of like the second time I watched it, I was like, man, she doesn't do much. She's supposedly, she's one of the new Ghostbusters. Like, she's one of the new team, I guess. And they don't do a whole lot with her. Basically, she, like I said, she smirks at Trevor a lot. Every time, I'm serious, every time you see her, she's got this like half smile on her face.
So they're flirting, basically.
And she doesn't get a whole lot of screen time, really. A few interactions with Trevor, and then a little bit at the end, and that's it. But I kind of felt she was probably my least favorite of the new characters, but that's only because they really didn't do that much with her or explain that much about her.
Yeah, they didn't really develop her character other than the fact that she was it third or fifth generation?
Fourth generation.
Okay, wow, look at that. I split it like down. I did third and fifth, and the answer was fourth. She's from the town. She feels like it's a deadbeat town, like a lot of kids do. They think their town's not that cool. And that's about it. And she works at the local sock hop. That's about it.
And I another thing that almost pulled me out of the movie. I've never been to Oklahoma that I remember. But I'm pretty sure I have a good grasp of Oklahoma and the
landscape?
Not the landscape, the diversity
of
Oklahoma. And I have to say, I mean, because in this town of Summerville, that there's this group of kids that hang out with Lucky and Trevor. There's like Indian kids. Middle Eastern Indian. There's like Middle Eastern kids. Lucky is African American. That is a very, very colorful small town in Oklahoma. Almost to the point where it distracted me to where like I don't really think there's that many Middle East immigrants living in a small town like that in Oklahoma. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they are just as diverse as everything. But it almost pulled me out of the movie where I was like, what? There's a lot of like. There's one of the main characters podcast is an Oriental kid. Asian.
So basically, they're more worried about diversity.
They didn't build the railroads here, dude.
They're more worried about showing a diverse cast versus staying true to the location and the time period. Which it didn't really bother me because I'm so used to seeing it now in movies. Now there are certain movies still where you have to stay true to form, but in a Ghostbusters movie in a tiny town in Oklahoma, who cares that there's a diverse, cast? It's just something they need to do. But I would argue that the two main characters are going to be Phoebe and her friend Podcast. They are on screen more than anyone else. I would say those are the two main characters. Yeah,
but I mean, with your new, I'm going to call it the new team, you've got Podcast, Phoebe, Trevor, and Lucky. Now, whether they continue on in a sequel as a Ghostbusting team, I don't know. But those were the 4 new characters who put on jumpsuits and basically used proton packs. Although I don't know that Podcast ever shot a proton pack. I don't think he did.
I think he just used the trap, the vehicle trap, the mobile trap. He may have at the very end when he got the one working, but he might have just got it working.
I think he got it working for Trevor. Yeah. The only thing I saw him use was the little PKE taser, which was new and never explained, which I mean is fine.
Well, Egon would have created new things, I think.
Yeah, well the mobile trap, which I thought was ingenious. Yeah. Like never in my mind. I was like that's a great idea. Basically all they did was they took a ghost trap and put it on the body of a remote controlled vehicle, and so they could move the trap around.
It was smart.
Yeah, it was a great idea. It was a great innovation.
So we should talk about podcasts because when Phoebe's being driven to school, her brother basically tells her like, "Hey, tell me a joke," and she tells a joke, and it's a dad joke, and he's like, "You're going to get killed out there. Basically, don't talk." But her mom's like, "Hey, try to make a friend." And, of course, she's going to need to make a friend. Someone's going to have to bring Phoebe out of her shell. She's going to need to team up with somebody. So we're introduced to podcast. And he calls himself that because he walks around with a microphone and a recorder, and he's constantly recording and narrating everything going on around him. And I found it to be really funny. Like, I really enjoyed it.
Actually, he only did it a couple of times. He did it when you first meet him, and then when he walks into Phoebe's house.
Well, what about when they go to the mountain? I thought he was recording then.
I think he was just talking to Phoebe there. I don't think he was recording. Maybe he was.
His shtick was that he has a podcast, so he calls himself Podcast, and he likes to record as much as possible, and he has one listener.
So for anybody keeping track, that's 2. I'm going to say let's say 2 summer movies with main characters who had podcasts.
Oh yes, the other one, Godzilla versus Kong. They're finally starting to mention podcasts into big movies, which they really should, because at this point, everyone I know either listens to podcasts or has a podcast. I mean, I think it's more popular than radio. I don't know anybody who still listens to the radio, but I know people who listen to podcasts.
But I enjoyed Podcast's character. I think he had some of the funniest lines.
True.
There's a scene, my favorite, I think, that he says is there's a scene where Paul Rudd's character is talking to him about the 1984 Ghostbusters phenomenon, and he looks at podcasts and he's like, You of all people don't know about this? And he goes, podcast goes, I'm ashamed.
That's right. That's right. That was funny.
That was pretty funny. And then he's got a couple other really good one-liners in there that are really good.
I thought he was a nice compliment to Phoebe's more drier, serious humor. Phoebe was funny without trying to be funny, so I thought Podcast did a good job complimenting that. But going to summer school, we now get to meet one of the other characters, Paul Rudd's. Gruberson was his name, and he is a seismologist. And he is teaching these kids basically because there's seismic activity going around in Oklahoma where there's no fault lines. And his idea of teaching the kids is introducing them to classic 1980 movies like Cujo and what was the other
Child's
one?
Play.
Child's Play. That's his idea of teaching the class. But of course, Phoebe's not interested in that, so she wanders off from the group and strikes up a conversation with Paul Rudd's character, Gruberson.
Yeah, so you've basically got him as the, I don't want to say mentor, because he's definitely not responsible enough for that title, but he's kind of hanging out with Podcast and Phoebe, and Phoebe finds the trap in her house that we saw at the beginning of the movie with the death of Egon, and she brings it to school, I guess to show, I'm assuming to show Podcast. I think there was some stuff that was cut out because there's some scenes in the trailer where they're in school and there's like a kid that like pops a bag of Doritos in Phoebe's face or something, like they're kind of, it looks like maybe they're picking on her or something, and then that's not in the movie.
I don't remember that.
Yeah. And then there's a scene when, I can't remember if it was the first day of school or when they were watching Child's Play, but there's a scene with a kid, he's got a bag of like pop Doritos on his desk. And I'm sure it's the kid from the trailer, but that's like, we just see it in passing. And I'd watched the trailer before I went to see it the second time. And I was like, that wasn't in the movie. And then I saw that and I was like, okay, they must have cut it out, but we still see the aftermath of his pop Doritos. But anyway, Paul Rudd sees the trap and that sparks the whole like, oh, you guys don't know about Ghostbusters? And he shows them YouTube videos, which I thought was kind of cool. Cause I mean, that's how you would go about doing it now. Like,
yeah.
Oh, you don't know about this? Here, come here. I'll show you on the computer. You know, like that's how people relate to things now.
Yeah. And then after watching it, Phoebe now realizes at this moment that Egon, her grandfather, was a Ghostbuster. She did not know that prior to that he was a Ghostbuster. So, and then I believe at this point she has spent the night in the house. Has she spent the night in the house, or did this happen after that?
She spent the night in the house.
Okay, so what happens is there's a chessboard out, and Phoebe's in bed, and the chessboard gets flung against the wall, and she sets it back up, and then an entity starts a move, like plays a move, so she responds and then goes to sleep. She handled that quite well, the fact that the chessboard went flying against the wall, and then a chess piece moved on its own. She took it in stride. Yeah,
well, I mean, she said, I think in the beginning of when she first met Podcast, that she doesn't believe in ghosts, because he points to the theater or something and he's like, the theater's haunted, and she's like, I don't believe in ghosts. So yeah, it kind of made me wonder, like, what did she think about that? Like, what did she think was going on? Because I most people would be like, you know, praying and going for holy water,
freaking out.
Yeah,
we're at least not staying in that room. Something.
Yeah. So anyway, we've got basically all the characters are together now. Mm-hmm. And I can't remember what most of the things that happen in the film are set in motion by the characters in the film. Whereas they have the trap, and then, so if that trap had stayed where it was, the movie wouldn't have happened.
To an extent, yeah, because there was still one roaming around. There was still an entity roaming around besides Egon. But you know, that it doesn't actually show up. Do you find that weird? Whatever killed Egon doesn't actually show up until the end. Do you remember seeing it appear anywhere?
Well, so there's two, what she's talking about, there's the two terror dogs, the gatekeeper and the keymaster, and the entity that's in the trap is one of those two. I don't remember which one. And he puts the trap in the floorboards of the house and
under a puzzle.
Yeah.
You have to solve a puzzle to get to
so it. Basically what she's saying is that like one of the terror dogs should have still been running around trying to find the other terror dog, I guess. And it doesn't really show up until the Paul Rudd and Podcast and Phoebe, they open the trap that they find and let the entity out that was in it, whichever one it was, Gatekeeper or Keymaster.
Did it look weird to you too?
It had different ears.
It had a werewolf look to it.
It had different ears than it does in its physical form. And so I don't know. I mean, there could be like a line that wasn't left in that could have explained it. Like maybe, when they're not together, they lose energy and dissipate. I don't know. But basically, they let it out of the trap, and that's kind of what kickstarts things.
Yeah, it ends up going straight to this mountain, which that's really the only thing in the landscape is this giant plateau of a mountain. And Trevor hangs out with the other kids who work at the sock hop, and he ends up going with them to the mountain where the kids like to hang out. It's this old mine. It's been abandoned, and they said a bunch of people were committing suicide, like jumping into the mine. But it's our first kind of introduction to it. And of course, big earthquake. And then he hears Trevor, the brother, is looking down this well, and he hears a voice say, Gozer. So now we know Gozer's going to be involved.
So Phoebe finds, with the help of Egon's spirit, although we don't see the spirit, it's basically like the PKE meter goes off. She found it under the chair. The PKE meter will go off, and she kind of figures out that she uses it as like a locator. Like, okay, if I move this way, it goes off, it turns off. If I go this way, it turns on. And so she kind of uses it to follow the trail of psychokinetic energy to where Egon wants her to go. And then the lights are coming on as she's moving through the house, and he guides her to his laboratory, which is underground. You got to use the fire pole to get, or a fire pole to get down there. And this is where there's quite a bit of callbacks in this, because you get the use of the fire pole. There's a sign, there's a maid service sign on the door of Egon's locker where he keeps his uniforms that was on their office door in the first movie. She finds a Nestle Crunch bar in his suit. There's just a bunch of stuff. There's equipment in there that you see in the first movie. And so there's a bunch of, like, I guess, fan service in that part where you see like that stuff that was in the first movie, Like,
yeah, a lot of Easter eggs. I oftentimes slide down poles into the dark where I don't know where I'm going.
Well, that was another thing they never explained. How did they get out of there?
That's an excellent question.
Yeah.
I didn't even think about that. I was just thinking about sliding down a pole into an unknown abyss is perhaps not the best idea.
Yeah,
how did they get back out of that room?
They never explain. I'm assuming there's steps somewhere that probably just go out, but they never explain how they.
It's in a shed, so maybe there's like a back exit somewhere. Once you get down there, you can see it.
Maybe it's a daylight shed.
Yeah, but basically, she finds Egon's equipment. His oh, hi, Hardy. Why can't I think of the name of the equipment?
Proton pack?
Oh my god, I'm like blanking all the names. She finds proton pack. It's not functioning though, and with the help of Ghost Egon, she fixes it.
Yeah, I kind of, even with like him helping, I'm using quote fingers, I doubt that anybody would be able to fix that properly. I mean, that's a very sophisticated piece of equipment, and basically he is just,
showing her where the tools are.
Yeah.
She's like, "Oh, I need wire nose wires," and then he shows her where it is.
She automatically knows what the components of the machine are.
It's a little odd too that it was even broken. If it was that easy to fix, why hadn't he fixed it yet?
I don't know. But anyway, so she's basically on board now. She knows that her grandfather was a Ghostbuster, and that this is her grandfather that is helping her, because she tells Podcast. So the next scene is she takes the proton pack out with Podcast, and they're going to test fire it. And she tells Podcast, like, yeah, I met my grandfather last night, and he, helped me fix this. And so they fire up the proton pack and they use it to shoot some bottles. And then, and this is probably the part of the movie where I was just like, oh, come on. That's, the biggest coincidence of the movie is after they test fire the proton pack, they hear there's a ghost in the abandoned factory that they're next to where they just happen to be testing the proton pack, and they go in to hunt the ghost or to see what the noise is, and they find the ghost.
Yeah, it's a Slimer type looking ghost too, only it's blue.
It's called Muncher, and it eats metal, which I don't know why ghosts need to eat. My theory with Ghostbusters is that some of the ghosts are deceased humans. Obviously, I mean, some of them look like people and were people, but some of the stuff that they deal with, they're not necessarily ghosts. They're things from other dimensions, or maybe they're ghosts from other dimensions. I don't know. Maybe they're ghosts that died on other worlds. I don't know. But a lot of the creatures that you see obviously aren't human or never were human or don't appear to be human. So that was always the way I kind of rationalized that is, those are, creatures from other dimensions, because they talk about other dimensions quite a bit, especially with the Gozer, coming in to our world. So that was kind of my rationalization of that, even though they never really, I think, fully explain it. But he's got like 4 or 5 arms, something like that. He's got multiple limbs, and he's kind of like a slug-looking thing, and he eats metal, but he can also like shoot it out too.
Yeah, almost like shrapnel.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And anyway, they shoot him, they almost catch him, but he gets away. And about this time is when Trevor gets Trevor had found Ecto-1 in a barn, and they meet Trevor. Trevor's got it running with the help of Egon, which he doesn't realize. And they meet Trevor. Trevor tells them to get in, and they go after the ghost. And they end up. This is the scene you see from the trailers where they're driving around the Ecto-1. Phoebe's on the gunner seat shooting at the ghosts, and they're basically, I don't know how well it's portrayed in the trailer, but they basically destroy most of the main street.
It's just as destructive as the Ghostbusters destroying the hotel in the first movie.
Yeah.
They cause more damage than the ghost does. The ghost caused minimal damage compared to what they do.
Yeah.
The ghost is just eating some trash cans and the occasional fire hydrant. They destroy buildings.
We did it, Patrick. We saved the city.
I know, right?
Remember the episode of SpongeBob?
Yeah. And once again, much like Jurassic World with the park Jeep, a vehicle that has been sitting for decades, just twist a few knobs and you're good to go. The vehicle will work.
Yeah.
But it has to for the sake of the movie. So, you kind of just have to let those things go.
So they end up catching the ghost, but then they get caught by the police. And this is where they go to jail, which I thought was
ridiculous.
An interesting... I mean, it's a small town. Maybe, I don't know.
Yeah, you don't put minors in an actual jail cell. Yeah. You put them in the lobby and call their parents.
So this is where we find out that Lucky's father is the sheriff. And then Mr. Gruberson and the mom come and get the kids. And I thought there was an interesting scene here where the mom is mad that the kids are in jail. And she says, "You were supposed to watch her this summer." And Mr. Gruberson goes, "I was?"
Oh, yeah, that's right.
And she was talking to Trevor. But I kind of, because for a second, I thought she was talking to him too. And I was like, is she really blaming him for her being in jail when they were just at dinner together? Like,
no. Yeah, I thought that part was kind of, I understand why it needed to happen. You've got to get to the point where the adults don't believe the kids. I mean, it's going to happen. It has to happen in these kind of movies. No one believes them. No one believes the kids. So it's up to the kids to, basically prove, that they were right. But yeah, this part kind of bothered me because the mom was she was saying how she wanted Phoebe to get into some trouble, like, kind of like have a life. And then Phoebe gets into trouble and then the mom gets upset about it. But I thought it was a little weird. The sheriff, Egon is known as the dirt farmer because he has a farm that has dirt and he never grows anything. He's eccentric, Of course, in a small town, people are going to think he's weird and like have names for him. So the sheriff kind of starts talking about Egon, about how he was the dirt farmer. And Phoebe gets really angry about it and actually grabs a hold of the gun for the proton pack and fires it up. So apparently she was going to kill this man because he talked bad about her grandfather, and it was completely inappropriate for her to do that. However, it just goes to show you she is a child. She's not an adult. You know, she thought it was okay to point a nuclear weapon at somebody because they spoke poorly of her grandfather. And I thought more than anything, that showed that she was a kid and not an adult in that moment, because she way overreacted.
Yeah. Well, when I first saw it, I didn't quite like get that vibe from it that you did. Like, I wasn't like, oh, that's ridiculous. I was more like, it reminded me of the scene where they were confronting Peck in the first Ghostbuster movie, and then he'd shut off the containment grid or whatever, and Egon just loses it on him and is like, "You're a mother."
On your, yeah, your mother.
And I thought that was kind of like maybe a nod back to that. But you're right, it was a little much, because I mean, basically, instead of just like lunging at the guy and like, I'm gonna punch you, she's like, I'm gonna cut you in half with a particle accelerator. So that was, I kind of see where you're going with that, but at the time I was like, oh well, this is just, a nod to Egon and his, your mother.
Yeah.
But
I mean, Egon was responding to an adult who shut down their containment system, thus, throwing the world into potentially apocalypse, and then lies about it to the authorities. That's Egon reacting to that. She's reacting to a guy saying, your grandfather was crazy. I'm going to now kill you with a nuclear weapon.
Well, I thought she was more upset that they weren't going to get the stuff back, and they needed it because they're starting to realize there's stuff going on. And we skipped over the phone call. Remember, they gave her a phone call.
Well, that's right, because at this point the mom was picking her up. Yeah, she got a phone call.
And right. I was kind of like, well, why in the hell is she calling so what she does, we see her earlier. She's watching a Ghostbusters not cartoon. Commercial on YouTube, and it's a commercial from the movie. Do you have specters that live in your house? Do you get feelings of dread in your basement or attic? Stuff like. And they flash the phone number up on the screen. Well, she writes it down, and then when they get arrested and they give her phone call, she calls that number, which goes to Ray's occult bookshop, and Ray picks up the phone. And I was wondering at the time, I'm like, why in the world is she calling that number now? Well, then I remember, like, I don't think they had any cell service because they were always complaining about not having any bars. And I guess that was the first time she'd had to use a phone. I don't know. They didn't have a landline.
Well, I think, too, at that point, she realized what was going on, like how much trouble they were in, the town was in, and that she was going to need their help. So I think that's why she called that number. And, of course, Dan Aykroyd as Ray picks up the phone, and at first, she doesn't really say who she is. She actually just says, did you know Egon? She starts asking questions about Egon. She doesn't even say that, she's the granddaughter until Ray's about to hang up on her. But Ray goes into a story about how Egon told Ray that, the end was coming. Basically, he insinuates that Egon lost it. He starts going on about the end of the world, and he has a breakdown. He goes to this town in the middle of nowhere, and he tells Ray that, the end is coming. And Ray says, that it's a bunch of, baloney. It's not true. And here's something I caught, is he mentions the firehouse, and he says it's been turned into a Starbucks, and that Egon took all his equipment, took Ecto-1. They lost the firehouse. It's a coffee shop now. And so Ray is quite upset with Egon. And I know this part really bothered you about how Ray felt.
Yeah, so up to this point, I enjoyed the movie. But up to this point, this is kind of where I have points in there's a lot of good movies out there that I feel are ruined by like one or two little details. Like for example, The Dark Knight Rises, the third movie in the Nolan Batman trilogy. I can't get past, the fact that Batman is retired when the movie starts. Like Batman doesn't quit. He just doesn't. So that movie almost was pretty much ruined by me. Just I don't care what else happened in the rest of the movie. I'm like, well, that's not that character. That's not what that character would do. That's not how that character would act. And much in that same vein, this scene almost ruined the movie for me. And really, if I sit down and think about it, it does ruin the movie for me. I have to basically, like, I'm going to ignore that and just, suspend my disbelief to, continue watching this movie, because Ray doesn't believe Egon when Egon tells him that there's a threat and that Gozer is possibly coming back. And it makes no sense to me. None whatsoever. Because Ray, of all people... Now, maybe if they'd have said it was another Ghostbuster, like Winston or Peter, I might maybe be a little bit more on board with that. But Ray and Egon were the two most read and, informed on that kind of stuff. And if anybody would believe Egon, it would be Ray. So Ray was like one of the more fantastical of the guys. He was one of the more imaginative, I guess you would say.
Ready to believe.
Yeah, and that for me, that scene took me out of the movie. Basically, where he said that he didn't believe Egon, and Egon was rambling about the end of the world. When, technically they've saved the world twice at this point. If the second movie was canon from supernatural threats that had worldwide implications. So why wouldn't you believe that there was another on the horizon?
Well, that and Gozer has appeared many times. Like it's resurrected and comes back in many forms. So there's no reason to believe that Gozer wouldn't be back. But at this point, she then informs Ray, because he's about to hang up on her, that she's Egon's granddaughter and that Egon was dead. And so
that Egon died 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
Which means that he died in modern times, like just, a couple weeks ago. So, he could have easily gotten cell phone evidence or like pictures or, and sent it to the other guys to prove that he was right. He found the temple where,
the well with the souls. He sets up the proton packs to, he could have just taken video of the well with all these like souls trying to come forth. And then the proton packs he has set up to keep them at bay. Just even a video of that would have proven what was going on.
He could have easily enlisted help, is what we're trying to say. He could have easily have proved that he needed assistance from the other Ghostbusters, and instead they created this rift, basically so the movie could happen. If it wasn't there, then the movie wouldn't have happened. And we wouldn't have had to, get into these new characters and all that. And that for me, I still enjoyed the movie. I went and saw it twice. If I hadn't liked it that much, I wouldn't have wasted my time to go see it twice. But that for me was kind of the moment where I was like, the jump the shark moment, where I'm like, okay, this doesn't make any sense. Like the writers literally hammered a square peg into a round hole to get this movie to get these characters where they needed them to be for this movie.
Yeah.
And I feel like they could have really fleshed that out a little bit, and just a few lines of dialogue probably would have made that better.
Yeah. Now at this point, Phoebe and her mom are arguing because Phoebe, you can tell, like, really respects her grandfather. She wants to have a relationship with him, basically. And then the mom, every chance the mom gets on screen, loves to tell everybody around her how horrible her father was.
And science is bad.
Yeah, science is bad. Our father abandoned, my father abandoned me because of science. Basically she exists to speak poorly of Egon. So that way, I don't know. I don't really actually know why, but she's really upset about it. Which, if my dad abandoned me, perhaps I would feel that way too. But I thought the way she talked to her children, and perhaps this is the basket case, the alcoholism, that's just her character, really immature. The way she talked to her kids, she was talking to them like they were fellow adults, not children. The language she would use, how she'd speak so poorly of their grandfather. I was just, your kids aren't there to be your therapist. And she would talk to them as if she were in therapy, all her feelings pouring out. So I thought that was like, really? Like, you need to be the adult here. Yeah.
Well, again, as I was saying earlier, we don't get enough background on her to really know what's going on, because, she has a mother. what did her mother say about? I mean, surely her mother knew, that Egon moved to that town to, stop the coming of Gozer. What did she tell her? What?
They don't bother to tell us.
Is the mother alive? Like, I mean, we don't even. I think at the very, very end of the movie, she introduces herself as Spengler. Like, she tells Peter Venkman her last name, and up until that point, we don't even know what their last name is in the movie. And it probably should have been something else because, well, I don't know. She never explains if she was married to the kid's father or not. I don't think.
I'm under the impression she was not.
Yeah, but
she said he was just like a loser.
Yeah, it's really there's just not enough background given.
Yeah, for a 2-hour long movie, they really don't flesh out the characters. But it didn't feel like 2 hours to me. It seems like it went by pretty fast. But yeah, you're right. Perhaps this should have been a 2-parter or something, so you could really get to know the characters a little bit more. They maybe didn't have to rush things so much. But okay, so at this point, they're back at the house. What happens next?
I have one more observation. So Paul Rudd and the mother, Carrie, is it Carrie? Callie? Whatever her name is.
It's pretty bad that we can't remember.
Well, her real name is like Carrie Coon.
Yeah,
what's her?
It's Callie.
Callie. So Paul Rudd and Callie get Trevor and Phoebe out of jail, but we never see Podcast get out of jail. So I'm assuming
I don't think he was arrested then.
I'm assuming his parents come and get him. Well, he was in the cell with them.
Was he at the beginning?
Yes.
Oh, his parents must have got him then. So, I think there's might be a deleted scene again.
So anyway, Trevor and Phoebe go back home with their mom, and then Paul Rudd goes to Walmart, as you do after most dates. People go
get some ice
Walmart.
cream.
Yeah, and he ends up running into the little marshmallow guys.
Stay Puffed, mini Stay Puffed.
I thought, when I first saw it, I was like, oh, that's cool. They're just jumping on that Baby Yoda bandwagon. They're like, let's just take this and make it small and
cute. I felt it was more of an Evil Dead 2 homage.
Well, I got vibes from that too, but it didn't make a whole lot of sense because it's just like, okay, there's these little Stay Puft guys running around. I guess you could say like, okay, I guess maybe Gozer has some residual memory of being in that form, so that's why those things appear. But other than that, it really doesn't make any sense why they're there.
I don't know. I mean, ghosts are starting to show up, so I guess that's just one of the forms. Kind of like in Ghostbusters when all those spirits get loose and like it possesses different entities. I think it was just a ghost that happened to inhabit the Stay Puft characters. I didn't really think it was a Stay Puft. I don't know. I didn't really think about it. They were cute, and I loved how they didn't mind killing each other. Like they were happy to die. I thought that was kind of funny.
Yeah. So there's a scene with those things running around, and initially you're just like, well, why? I mean, it's cute and it's funny, but why are they there? And then Paul Rudd ends up running into one of the terror dogs. I don't remember. Was he the gatekeeper or the keymaster? I think he was the keymaster.
Yeah, the boy's always the keymaster. He's the key. That's the male.
Yeah.
The gatekeeper, the hole, is the female. Get it?
So anyway, he ends up getting chased by the terror dog out through Walmart, and he throws his ice cream at it, which almost buys him like a half a second. And which the effect they did, the terror dogs were pretty much done with practical effects.
Oh yeah, they did a really good job. I thought they looked amazing. Although much like Tully, was that his name in the
Louis Tully? Yeah.
Louis, much like him running away from his apartment building into the open outside that restaurant was a mistake. Him leaving Walmart, I think, was a mistake. I think he was safer in the Walmart. And
then, so he gets captured, and then let's see. I'm trying to remember what happens next. It's starting to build towards the climax of the film.
He goes to the temple to destroy the proton packs.
So Egon had set up some proton packs to automatically fire when the well of souls would fill up.
Yeah.
And basically it would disseminate that, and it would stave off the coming of Gozer, basically. Oh, and by the way, Eva. So I mean, that's another thing too. Like Egon could have taken it. So Ivo Shandor, the guy that built Dana Barrett's apartment in the first movie, the Gozer cult guy, his body is just laying in a glass case, like Vladimir Lenin style, in this like mine. And I'm like, Egon never thought to like take a picture of that, send it to Ray, and like, hey, look who I found. You know, I mean,
or push him into the well of souls, like get rid of it or something. Because every time the souls would come close to the surface, he'd start to wake up, like he was basically possessed.
Yeah.
So that was pretty creepy. The kids discovered that.
Yeah, and he's played by J.K. Simmons, who is in. He's like the Samuel L. Jackson of the late 2000s. He's in everything.
He's great.
And so Paul Rudd, he sabotages Egon's safety system there that he's got set up to automatically go off, which allows the spirits to come up, and that's basically like the containment unit getting breached. That's when all the ghosts like start coming up and start terrorizing the town and stuff. And nobody, you know, it would have been nice to see like in the previous movies where the mayor comes and is like, okay, you know, we need your help. If the sheriff would have been like, okay, I need you guys to do something.
Yeah, but they did have, it wasn't as extensive as the previous Ghostbusters where they show all the different entities bothering people. I think they had the coal miner, the miner at the diner, the waitresses serving him coffee.
You're a poet and didn't know it.
But did you remember any others?
We see, I think we just see some spirit. Oh yeah, the eyeball ghost. The one that has the eye that comes, because I had that toy. I had the figure of that ghost from the cartoon, and there's a couple of others. I think that it's just real brief, real short scene. You don't really get the sense of scale. I think that you kind of did with the first movie.
Yeah. That
basically the ghosts are like terrorizing everybody in town, but the kids show back up at the police station to get their stuff, and there's nobody there. Like all the cops are gone, presumably out either running from or trying to fight the ghosts.
But
they
you
never
don't
really
know.
explain.
It's like they just disappeared.
Yeah. And they end up getting their gear back. Quite pretty clever. Yeah. Which I mean, I thought it was kind of a cool moment.
It was podcast idea.
And that's kind of the thing. Like everybody kind of does their own. They all have their own little contributions. And then they form a plan, or they start to form a plan, and their mother, she's actually down in, she discovers Egon's lab. I can't remember if I think she finds a PKE meter and basically follows it down to the lab. She finds a collage of photographs of her throughout her life. That means basically Egon was keeping an eye on her or keeping tabs of her. Apparently somebody was sending him those photos. Probably her
Perhaps
mother.
the mysterious mother.
Yeah, this mother that doesn't exist. Maybe she was grown in a petri dish. I don't know. Maybe he was. Maybe she started out as a spores, mold, and fungus.
He does like to collect them.
And anyway, she gets possessed, turned into a dog by the gatekeeper down in Egon's lab, which I kind of thought was weird that it was.
I think he was hanging around the farmhouse the whole time. Like, because that's where it ended up when it killed Egon. I think maybe it was around,
possibly
waiting for its opportunity. It couldn't really. There was no point in creating a gatekeeper until a keymaster had formed.
But yeah, and I thought it was kind of weird that, I mean, I don't know what the rules are, but apparently like Ghost Egon either didn't do or couldn't do anything to stop it from possessing his daughter. Or maybe he wanted it to happen, so that would be like, okay, let's get this ball rolling so we can stop this. I don't know, and it's not explained. So she gets possessed. Paul Rudd is possessed. They meet up at the mountain. The kids show up at the mountain. They see them turn from the people into the dogs. They see them turn into the terror dogs, and they were much cooler about it than I probably would have been.
Yeah, they seem pretty level-headed kids.
So you see your mother turn into a dog, and then you're like, okay, well, let's form a plan. And most people would have been like, oh my God, did you see that? What the
Yeah, look, my mom's dead. Like, I would assume my mom is dead.
Yeah, there was a lot of lightning during that transformation. So yeah. I think that in my mind, I would feel that the probability of survival was probably pretty low, but whatever, you know. So they actually So Gozer shows up.
Yep. And it's confirmed that Gozer cannot show up until the Keymaster and Gatekeeper are in Terror Dog form and have mated. Like, that's confirmed. Gozer's power is attached to these dogs possessing a human body.
Yeah, and you have to have both of them. You can't have one.
Yeah.
And I thought that was, I don't know, it's a little weird. They don't, like, go too far into the lore of it. I mean, there's a scene where they're looking through the Tobin Spirit Guide and they're kind of talking about it a little bit, but they don't really, they basically like, well, this is the way it is. And there's no explanation. It's like, this is just the way it is.
Yeah.
And so they quite cleverly, I believe this is probably what Egon's plan was as well. They trap one of the dogs, the one that was possessing the mother, and they, there's an escape from where they leave the temple. They're driving away, and Paul Rudd's terror dog is chasing them. There's another short chase, and they get back to the farmhouse, and Phoebe has discovered that the farmhouse is basically a giant trap that Egon's constructed to catch. Why he didn't, I mean, I guess maybe because he needed materials at the farm. I don't know, but why didn't he just build it in the mine?
I think it had to do with the silos at the farm. He needed
the capacitor for the electricity, which they didn't work anyway until they were provided a charge.
So the movie needed them to.
Yeah, until the movie needed them to. So anyway, they get back to the farm, and Gozer shows up, which now we're given the idea that the entity that was chasing Egon at the beginning of the movie was Gozer.
I think it was a terror dog.
And because she basically comes through the corn in the same manner and shows up, and then they try to do the trap. The traps don't work. She's
in like a half form though. Like you can see her. Versus at the beginning, you couldn't see the form.
Yeah.
I don't know. I really felt like, I don't know. I kind of feel like it was the other terror dog, but you don't really know.
Maybe it had something to do with the fact that the proton packs were set up around the well, and maybe she wasn't as strong when at the beginning of the movie because Egon had his safety measures in place and they were working, so the well couldn't explode.
Yeah. So basically it's speculation though. There's no confirmation as to who the entity is that actually killed Egon. Was it a terror dog or was it Gozer? And we skipped over the fact the temple had dates on the wall of key events, and we actually recognized all of them throughout history. And did you see the future dates too?
Yeah.
So they had dates in the future where this was going to happen again. Basically, this is an ongoing issue.
The next one I think was 2131. So be ready.
Yeah, be ready for that. And we also missed the resurrection of J.K. Simmons' character.
Yeah. He spent more time dead in the movie than he did resurrected.
Yeah, so he's finally resurrected, and Gozer comes, forms, and he's like, basically, hey, I did all this for you. Let's now rule together. And she literally rips him in half.
Which, I mean, it was kind of funny. Like, oh, haha, that was funny. But then you're like, man, what a waste of that character.
Yeah. I guess it was just to show that Gozer is not going to share power with anybody. Why would they? Why would Gozer share power with a human?
Yeah. Well, my big problem with that was why was his body at that place and not at the top of his building in New York?
I'm guessing it has something to do with the Well of Souls. Like he knew that this temple was going to be the place where Gozer would eventually show up. Like maybe he didn't have confidence that it was going to happen at the building. I don't know. That's another one of those unanswered questions.
Yeah.
There's a lot of unanswered questions.
So anyway,
back at the farm.
They're back at the farm. Gozer's coming after them. They've got one of the dogs trapped. They're trying to fight her off. The mini marshmallow guys show up. They sabotage the proton pack that's in the Ecto-1. Lucky shows up. The big plan was for her to ambush Gozer at the farm when Gozer shows up. which really, I mean, it was kind of a cool reveal, but at the same time, I'm like, well, what did that accomplish by having her go to the farm and just wait?
I think it's because they knew they were going to have to use the big trap.
Yeah.
That was the place they had to trap Gozer. So they needed someone there to help, corral her. So ideally, all 3 proton packs were going to be used, and then they'd be able to trap Gozer. But of course, one is out of commission, and apparently it has to be 3, it cannot be 2. Gozer requires 3 beams.
What did they get? Because I don't know that they I don't know that they ever had 3 on her.
Wasn't Phoebe had one, and Trevor had one, and then Lucky had one.
But Trevor's was out of commission.
Yeah.
And I don't know that Phoebe and Lucky ever had her at the same time.
Oh, I don't remember.
But anyway, it doesn't matter. So anyway, Gozer ends up getting the hold of the trap.
Destroys
she
it.
Releases the gatekeeper. It possesses Lucky immediately. I don't know why it didn't go back and get the mom, but it gets whatever. It gets Lucky. So Lucky's out of commission. Things are looking bad, and then the OG Ghostbusters. I mean, I don't know. Did they
pivotal moment?
Did they walk up? I mean, there's they just walk up and they're in full gear.
Yeah, they arrive on scene. I'm sure there's just so much chaos going on that no one else noticed them arriving. Can't hear the car pull up.
Yeah. Well, my thing is they probably had to come through the town to get there.
Oh, that was a big snore from the babies.
Yeah, they had to come through town to get there. So did they just ignore all that ghost activity going on in the town and head right to the farmhouse?
Yeah, they got to go for the big kahuna.
So, yeah, I guess so. So they show up. Peter, what's his name? Bill Murray. He looks really frail.
I actually just thought he looks like he has for his last few movies. Like, he looks the same to me as he has the last 10 years. I mean, I don't know how old he is, but he's got to be in his 70s, if not 80s. I think he looks the same. Yeah. I mean...
Well, it was really cool seeing them all in uniform, back together. There wasn't... I mean, other than a few, one-liners, really, there wasn't a whole lot done with them. They... throw some proton blast at Gozer.
Well, Gozer asked the key question, are you a god? Because Ray goes through his speech about fish and wildlife, like you're in violation of fish and wildlife. And she goes, are you a god? And for a second, you can tell he wants to say no. And Winston and
come on, Ray.
Peter are like, come on, you know the answer.
So anyway, they immediately cross the streams. Mm-hmm. To shoot Gozer, and which confused me a little bit because it was my understanding that to cross the reason they crossed the streams was to get the gateway to close shut.
That's what they did in the original.
Yeah, and there's no gateway where they're at. There's just Gozer's just standing there, and they cross the streams.
The gateway's back at the temple.
So I'm assuming I don't know. I was a little confused as to why they did it, but they did it. But it didn't matter because it doesn't work. So. She's able to pull the streams apart for whatever reason, because the writers needed her to, I guess. And then Phoebe is able to get back on her feet, get the proton pack, and she starts because the OG Ghostbusters get zapped and they fall down. Of course, she doesn't instantaneously murder any of the main characters, just Ivo Shandor, and the main characters get pushed back. Phoebe shows up, starts shooting her with the proton, but the 3 main characters' proton packs couldn't hold her, but Phoebe's one proton pack is powerful enough to force her power beams or her Gozer's lightning back or whatever. But she starts to struggle and lose the power, and then what happens?
It was actually really like a Harry Potter Voldemort moment when they have the final duel, and they've got the 2 power beams going at it, and it's about good versus evil, and then eventually the good beam overpowers the evil. So yeah, it was totally like a Harry Potter Voldemort duel there. So Phoebe is struggling, she's just a kid. It's hard for her to maintain it, and then all of a sudden these arms, envelop her and hold the proton pack with her, and it's Egon in ghost form. So we actually get to see him. Of course, They aged him as they should because he died as an older man. But I thought the CGI looked really good. Now, he doesn't talk. Unlike a young Luke Skywalker in The Mandalorian, they don't even attempt speech, which I kind of thought was weird. I felt like they could have. I think someone probably could do an Egon voice. Someone could have voiced it. Or perhaps out of respect, they decided not to. They're like, yeah, the only person who can voice him is Harold Ramis, and since he's deceased, it's not possible. So he's having to communicate through facial expressions, which it's CGI. And I thought they did a really good job. I was impressed with how they did. But with Egon's help, they're able to hold Gozer, and then Podcast is finally able to zap the Stay Puft enough to where Trevor gets his going, and he actually zaps the silos, which give it the electricity they need to power up and activate the trap.
Yeah, and I was kind of like, that was Trevor's idea to shoot the capacitors to like power the traps, because you kind of see him look at that, and he looks at the trap. You see him put it together, and I mean, I guess it was fine, but I would have liked to have seen maybe. Either Egon like point it out, or maybe have Phoebe say something.
Personally, if I were Phoebe, when she discovers that there's traps there, she doesn't test it to make sure it's working. I thought that was kind of odd. She just assumes they're going to work. Yeah. She would have known that they need power. I don't know. That was another kind of gap in the writing, or inconsistency with a character. I don't know why she wouldn't test it out.
Yeah. But anyway, Gozer... and that's another thing. So was Gozer... Because especially the second time I watched, I was trying to pay attention to see if they were... Did they trap Gozer? Or did they trap enough energy that she was dispelled? Because I would think that they wouldn't be able to just trap Gozer. I mean, she's a god. So
I think they're insinuating that she's trapped. Like, I think it was supposed to be a more permanent solution to the Gozer problem. And she didn't take on her form, her destructive form. She's in her god form. The old movie, the first one, she turns into the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man. She doesn't have a chance to take on a form. She's just in her Gozer form. So I think they trapped Gozer.
Yeah. Well, so that's the end of the movie. There's not a whole lot of epilogue with these characters. Basically, that ends with them right there on the lawn of the farm.
Just a moment where Egon basically gets to hug his daughter, and then he dissipates, so she gets to have closure, basically, that he did actually love her. So now she feels better about herself, and perhaps she won't be an alcoholic. Right,
but literally the movie just ends like right there. There's no it ends there on the lawn of the farmhouse. There's no follow-up. But there are two credit scenes, like a Marvel movie. One is a scene between Bill Murray and Sigourney Weaver. And while it's really cool to see those characters back and interacting, does absolutely nothing for the story. I mean, it's literally, they're playing with the little shock machine that Venkman has at the beginning of the first movie. Yeah. And the psychic cards with the stars and the wavy lines and shit. And I thought it was a really cool scene, but it had, nothing. It did nothing for the movie.
It showed that Peter and Sigourney Weaver's character Dana were still together.
Well, they also did that at the end of Ghostbusters too. So we didn't really need that. And then at the very end, there's a scene where Winston's bringing Ecto-1 back to the firehouse, which Ray said earlier in the movie that was a Starbucks. So yes, I know you had a major problem with that.
I don't like when I feel like on a multi-million-dollar production, someone should be in charge of continuity. Like, I just feel like those mistakes shouldn't be made unless Dan Aykroyd improv that scene and they had already filmed Winston's scene. Sometimes that does happen where an actor will improv and it doesn't really get changed or caught. But I always feel like there should be at least one person in charge of a set that's responsible for continuity.
There was a lot of cuts on that phone call, jumping between Ray and her. They could have easily left that out.
Yeah. I guess someone in editing kind of screwed that up. But we also get introduced to Winston, he becomes this financial guru. Basically, he's extremely wealthy. He's been paying for Ray's rent for the bookstore. He makes a comment, one day it'll make a profit. So he basically covers Ray's rent, but we get the impression that Ray doesn't know about it. I think that's kind of weird. And
I didn't get that impression.
Really? It was I don't know, it was weird to me. Why would Ray take money from, but the person who's talking to him while we're learning this is Janine. She has the lucky coin that she gave Egon in the old movies, but
actually we didn't see that. That's a deleted scene.
Oh, that is a deleted scene.
She gives him I think a coin from the World's Fair or something like that, and she's like, "It's my lucky coin," and Egon says something like, "Oh, I don't believe in talismans," or something like. I don't know. He says something, and she's like, "Well, I've got another." Or he goes, "No, I might not be coming back. I don't know if you want to give me that." And she's like, "It's okay. I've got another one at home."
But so yeah, it turns out Winston, is wealthy, and he's basically been helping the other. Well, Peter doesn't need any help. It seems like he's doing fine on his own. But that's another thing that bothered me when I realized that Winston was still involved in the other guys' lives to an extent. Why wasn't he helping Egon? Or perhaps he was, because Janine may have been helping pay Egon's bills with Winston's money. We don't really know.
That's an excellent idea. That's a good catch. Well, it's not a catch because it's never fleshed out, but it would explain why Janine was talking to Winston. Maybe there was some kind of financial help from Winston there, but again, why wasn't he helping more? Like, why wasn't he doing more to like
the actual Ghostbuster stuff, not just the money stuff? But...
So yeah, that's a good. I like that. That's a good rationalization for that. But yeah, so remember earlier, way back at the beginning of the podcast, where I said how I don't hate the 2016 Ghostbuster movie with the female cast. Like, I mean, a lot of people do. A lot of people hate that movie with a passion. And I said that I have an unpopular opinion about it because I think it's better than a lot of people think. And one of the reasons why I still think that it's not as bad as people think is because it was its own thing. Well, granted, the original cast was in it. It doesn't mess with their story. It's a brand new story, brand new Ghostbusters, brand new world. And now we've got a new OG Ghostbuster film set in the original universe. And what did it do? It screwed up their lives. Like, Egon and Ray were mad at each other and at each other's throats. The Ghostbusters were broken up. Everybody thought Egon was crazy. And it screwed up with the characters that I know and love from the past. 2016 version didn't. It was brand new characters. I don't give a shit about them. Some of the stuff they said was funny. I enjoyed the idea that there was a human that was bringing forth the ghost. I thought that was the original idea. And that's one of the reasons why I hold that movie in as high, which I don't hold it in high regard. Don't get me wrong. It's not a great movie, but it's not as bad as everybody says it is because it didn't screw with the original Ghostbusters. It screwed its own self.
That's true. If you're going to have a movie, and people have dubbed this new Ghostbusters as nothing but a fan service movie, if that was true, and it is to an extent, if it was really true though, they wouldn't show us such horrible lives for the characters we love. Because at the end of Ghostbusters, everything was in the best possible place. Much like Star Wars at the end of Return of the Jedi. They had won the day. They're now going to live happily ever after. And then when they introduce The Force Awakens, the three characters that we love all have had horrible lives. Like the last 25, 30 years has been awful for them. Why do I don't want to know that. I want happily ever after. That is something I didn't enjoy. I was just like, oh my God, nothing but pain. Like they didn't keep in contact with each other even.
Well, at the beginning of Ghostbusters 2, they were broken up. They weren't Ghostbusters anymore. Ray and Winston were like doing kids parties. Peter had a TV show. Peter was probably the most successful out of any of them. And then Egon was doing research, God knows where, maybe on his daughter. I don't know. But again, it's like, okay, so they had to come together for Ghostbusters 2 in Ghostbusters 2, so they had to. I don't know what it is about sequels, but they just feel like they have to.
Yeah, but Ghostbusters 2, I never got the impression they were angry at each other.
No.
Or
The business failed.
Yeah, exactly. Ghosts dried up, basically. Yeah. But this one, it was learning well, I mean, Winston apparently has had a pretty decent life, but he didn't have his best friends around him. Yeah, you're right. It is kind of a stab in the eye to what we loved as kids. Like, it took our childhood, favorite movies and just like, here, let me just gouge your eyes out here, give you some pain. Because, you're right. Force Awakens was, oh my God. It's like, why don't you just...
I liked the new characters. Mm-hmm. I liked Phoebe. I liked Podcast. I liked Trevor. And Lucky, for what I saw of her, she was okay. I think she smirked too much, but, I had no problem with them. I wasn't like, oh, these new characters suck. I think Podcast is the Ray of this group, and you can tell. And
definitely.
I mean, you can tell. That's what they were going for. Obviously, Phoebe's Egon. Didn't get Venkman vibes from Trevor. I think maybe there's a couple of scenes where they're trying to do that, where he, where
I thought his humor was a little bit more dry. Like,
I didn't get. He just wasn't the showman that Venkman is.
Yeah.
So here's I made this analogy the other day, and you were like, it blew your mind. Mm. So I'm gonna describe a movie to you, and you tell me what movie I'm describing. So, a group of new characters in an intellectual property are who embody traits of the original characters come together. They discover things about the past involving the original characters. They discover the vehicle that the original characters used to run around in and have adventures in. They take over that vehicle and have adventures. Then they face a threat that is almost the exact same threat that the original characters faced in the original movie. What movie am I describing?
The Force Awakens.
And
Ghostbusters Afterlife.
They are the same movie. They are the exact same movie.
Yeah, I agree with that. I didn't really put it together. I mean, I saw that, they're extending something I enjoyed as a child, but I didn't quite put it together. You're right. How similar Force Awakens and Ghostbusters Afterlife is. They basically took the Force Awakens and they just inserted Ghostbusters.
Yeah. And I mean, don't get me wrong. I thought the Force Awakens out of the new trilogy was the best. I didn't like to see it, but I agree with you. They shouldn't have killed off Han Solo. But I knew that Harrison Ford had wanted that character to die for a while, so he probably wouldn't have.
He wanted to try and Empire.
So, I think it was Return.
No, he wanted to die in the Carbonite Empire.
Was it?
Uh-huh.
I don't remember that. Anyway, I just felt that those movies they're the same movies, just with a different intellectual property. Intellectual?
Yeah, intellectual.
That's my Southern coming out. Intellectual.
So basically, go see it, enjoy it for what it is. You're probably going to be like us and you can't help but nitpick here and there, but as just a movie just to sit down and watch and see some of the characters you did love, just enjoy it and try not to think about it too much.
You know what, though? I've watched and listened to a couple of reviews since I've seen it, mm-hmm. Post viewing, and I have yet to see or listen to one where somebody is bitching about the Ray Egon thing, where they're like, why wouldn't Ray believe? I have not heard anybody mention that. And maybe there's somebody out there that is, and I just haven't come across a review. But I have not seen anything resembling my major complaint with the movie. But I did enjoy the movie. I'm glad I went to see it. I went to see it twice. Granted, I didn't pay for one of those times, but I enjoyed the movie for what it was. I enjoyed the fan service. There was a lot of nods. I'm sure there's a lot of Easter eggs in there that I didn't catch. There's a lot of little things in there. Like at one point, Phoebe opens the glove box on the Ecto-1 and like a Twinkie falls out, So there's a lot of little wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Remember that from the first movie? And I love that stuff. Enjoyed it. The only major problem I had with the movie is the way they wrote the OG characters and kind of their basically their disillusion and how they came apart. It would be interesting if they did a sequel to this movie and they fleshed it out a little bit more, and it turns out that the reason Egon and Ray were such at odds is because Callie's mother was involved with Ray at one time or something like that, where they've split up over a woman, which I don't really see that happening either.
Ghostbusters Days of Our Lives.
But it makes more sense than Ray just going like, "Ghosts are coming back?" Nah, that's no way. That.
You know what they need to make next? They need to make a new Three Amigos. They need to make a Three Amigos continuation. Wouldn't that be funny?
Three are amigos.
30 years later. Okay, well, I think we pretty much covered everything. I definitely recommend you watch it, but like I said, don't expect it to have all your answers. Much like The Force Awakens, it's not going to solve all of our problems in life and be on a silver platter.
You know what will solve all my problems?
What?
Batman.
Batman. Yeah, Batman is going to solve all our problems come March. Look for that review. He's going to be drooling on Mike the whole time.
If it's good.
If it's good, it'll be great.
They're gonna make Batman do something like completely out of character. It's gonna be like 1 second Batman's gonna be like, "I love puppies," and I'm gonna be like,
Okay, well, I hope you enjoyed I hope you've seen it, so maybe you'll notice things that we noticed and be like, "Oh yeah, you're right." Or if you haven't seen it yet and you've just been spoiled for you, you can look for these things to see whether or not we remember it correctly. But no matter what, Ghostbusters is a wonderful franchise. One of the best things that was ever came out of the 80s was Ghostbusters. So
we should keep going for like another half hour, and then our review will be just as long as the movie. I can't believe we talked this long about.
This is one subject we can talk about for forever. Movies. Have you noticed? We love movies.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks for sticking with us this long, and I'm curious to see what your thoughts are on Ghostbusters Afterlife. Like I said, good movie, not a great movie, not on the level of the first one, but nothing ever will be ever. I don't think
it's not possible. It's just not possible.
Ghostbusters is Ghostbusters, and it's going to be Ghostbusters, and there's never going to be another Ghostbusters.
Ghostbusters is A+. This is a B-.
Agreed. All right, folks, we're going to let you go. Be safe out there. If you're interested in any cool Alasquatch gear, you can head to the AlasquatchPodcast.com website, and you can get a signed copy of my book, Abandoned, The History and Horror of Port Chatham. You can get some Alasquatch t-shirts, books, magnets, anything like that you want for you or someone you know that enjoys Alaska and Bigfoot. Thanks for listening, and we will talk to you later.
Have a good night.